Maintains a web page on lewispalmer.org through which members of the public can find live streaming information and meeting records, as well as presentations and resources which will be reviewed and discussed during this meeting. Ms. Wood, could you call roll, please?
Yes. Mr. Schwartz?
Here.
Mr. Taylor?
Here.
Ms. Upchurch?
Here.
Ms. Phillips is absent and excused, and Mr. Clausen may be calling in a bit later.
I'd like to make a change to the agenda. So I'd like to move item 3 up to the front, and then we'll follow the agenda as outlined. Any problems, issues with that?
Sounds great.
Are you looking for a second? No, we just,
Just letting you know,
okay.
unless there's an issue.
I don't know why, but okay.
We're moving it to accommodate Ms. Baker. So if that's okay, I can introduce our third item as our first item.
Yeah, let's do a Pledge of Allegiance.
Sure.
And then we'll jump into the work session. I'll lead. Did you want to?
Sure, that'd be great. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to our work session for February 7th. We're pleased to have a few items for you all this morning, and the first one, and appreciate the accommodation here, will be our Nutrition Services Director, Ms. Stacy Baker, as well as Chris Coulter from our Operations Department. And so we want to make sure that you all are aware of what's happening with Colorado Proposition FF. So this is our update for you. This is a Healthy School Meals for All bill that was passed. And I'm just going to tee Ms. Baker and Mr. Coulter up, and you guys can take it from here.
Thank you. Thank you for including me in today's meeting. So the goal of this is just to update everyone on, excuse me, this proposition and where we stand right now in the department with everything, and just kind of go through some of the details. So stop me at any time if you have questions. So as you know, in November, Proposition FF passed. It was 51 to about 45% vote. And so it's set to start, if districts opt into it, for the 23-24 school year. What is Proposition FF? So as I stated, it's beginning in 23-24. The intent is to provide districts an opportunity to do meals for free for all National School Lunch Program children. So one point here to make is the schools have to be on the NSLP program in order to opt in. Not all of our schools are on that program right now. All 5 of our elementaries, both Monument Academies and those are the only ones that are on it. The middle school and the 2 high schools are not. So this would, at this point, only impact our 5 elementaries and Monument Academy. So you can't partition the schools out either. So we couldn't select certain schools to do it. It's either an all NSLP or nothing. And the details of this, it's paid for by basically increasing taxes in households with incomes of $300,000 or more. And this is done by limiting the state income tax deductions and using additional federal funding for school meals. So there's still a lot of details that they're working out, but it's mainly going to impact the $300,000 or more income. And it's estimated to be a roughly $100 million program per year across the state.
Just so that the bolded section there where it includes Lewis Palmer Middle School, it's not really included, right?
Correct, sorry.
So that's erroneous. I just want to make sure everyone notes that.
Let's make sure, as we're cleaning that up, that we can update a fresh revised copy so it's accurate.
Yeah. We had put the middle school in here because the intention upon discussion was possibly to include it, but we'll correct that.
Just one quick point of clarification. You'd mentioned it was all or nothing. But is it all or nothing only for certain schools, or is it all or nothing for the entire district?
It's all or nothing only for the schools on National School Lunch Program. So ours are the 5 elementaries and the 2 Monument Academies.
Okay.
And then if we wanted to opt in at the other schools, at the 3 secondaries, we would have the choice, but we would have to put them back on the program.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
So again, just kind of stating who can participate. So it can be a little confusing. So any NSLP school meal provider can participate in the program. So in our district, I'm known as the School Food Authority. It's just the title. And currently there's 183 school meal providers in Colorado. So how the funding is going to work, for clarification, every year or every month I submit claims to CDE Nutrition that are then paid out based on rates approved by the USDA, and those rates are different for free students, reduced students, and paying students. So how this essentially would work is that the state of Colorado will pick up the difference and pay that difference to match the free rate for all students. So you can see here on these graphs here that free meals are 100% funded by USDA. Now that's free meals, meaning they have submitted an application. They are approved for free meals based on their eligibility. There's certain levels of eligibility where it comes from, whether it's income, direct certification, or other source categorical, but that is 100% funded by USDA. Reduced price, a portion of it is USDA, and a portion is picked up by the state. Same thing for those students not eligible for free or reduced price meals. But we get, right now it's 85 cents per paying student. The intent is that then the state of Colorado will pay the rest to match federal paying for free. Questions? Yes.
All these funds from the Department of Agriculture or from the state come in the
Rear.
So the district is fronting the money
Yes.
for this program, along with many others.
Yeah, so I can't submit our paperwork for claiming until the end of the month, where I have reports for every school, and then I enter it into that.
Yeah. So, since we spent a lot of time on cash flow here, how long does it take from the day you submit the paperwork till a check arrives and is deposited in the district's account?
Typically, we get the money about by the end of the month, so it's usually about a month later.
Okay, so it's 30 days-ish.
Yeah. Now, with COVID, there was a time when the state did not have that money, and it was several months, but we did get it, but they were waiting on federal money to pay to the state so that
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there any other? No, it's confusing to explain, so.
I just want to remind and clarify that, this is housed in its own separate fund. It's its own distinct piece of money, which means it also has its own fund balance for that cash flow. So just want to make sure that we're not thinking that the general fund is providing any of that cash flow support. It's doing it on its own.
Right, but there has to be a beginning
Right.
to fund it.
Right.
Right.
Okay, so Obviously, the intent of FF is to enhance student health, growth, learning, and achievement, ensuring no child goes hungry while at school. That's the way the bill was written. Provide equitable access to school meals and mitigate any potential sources of shame and embarrassment for students, and remove potential financial concern for families. So inflation, the cost of living, they're already high, and removing that burden from the families to pay for school meals can be advantageous for those families.
I'm sorry, I have a quick question. When you say meals, so does it include a breakfast, a lunch? I mean, what does meals mean?
Good question. It includes both. We do breakfast currently at Palmer Lake Elementary, Bear Creek Elementary, and Lewis Palmer Elementary. So it would include breakfast for those schools and then lunches at all 7 others, or all 7 of them.
Is there any kind of end-of-week take-home snack for those that have need?
We don't do any part of the after-school snack program. Tri-Lakes Cares works with the schools to do those, but we remain separate from that.
Thank you.
So we know the benefits, but discussing some of the challenges that we are facing right now with this, and we'll go down just the list, is the number one is the kitchen staffing impacts. We are anticipating a bump to exceed COVID numbers with this. The state voted on it. More people know about it. We did find that when meals were free during COVID, there was still quite a bit of families that weren't aware of that. We had a lot of students out routinely for quarantine. Some of whole classes at some points were out. So we're anticipating, and the directors across the state are anticipating a huge bump with this. We're worried about the impact to daily schedules. This would mostly impact our big schools, for example, Bear Creek and Monument Academy. In working out numbers, if we anticipate close to 75 to 100 kids per class coming through the line, they have 20 minutes, and we're concerned that that's not enough time to get them through. And I'm not alone in this concern. This is a concern across the state with nutrition departments. Menu availability, food supply, cost increases. We will see a pretty sharp rise in that. Menu availability, meaning the meals we're doing now are more advanced. We're doing teriyaki chicken, mandarin orange chicken, stuff like that. We can't accommodate 3,000 to 3,500 meals of that a day. So the menu will have to change. Most departments across the state would be looking at doing one option, one hot option per day, and no other choices. And that may not be for the length of the year, but we would at least need to start like that. And so our menu would look vastly different. So right now, in discussing where we stand as a district, district-wide, our free and reduced percentage is 8.34%. So almost 92% of our families do not qualify for free and reduced meals. And I think that that's, something that we're going to take into consideration in looking at those numbers as well.
Before we leave this slide, though, you're anticipating a bump in students that are participating, but the last point there, where currently there's eligibility for free and reduced meals at 8.5% roughly, that doesn't reflect how many are participating in lunch. And so the question I'm trying to get to in my mind is, what's the bump? I mean, I'm not sure I understand.
So right now, we average about 1,800 to 2,000 meals a day across our 7 schools that are on a National School Lunch Program. And we do close to 300 breakfasts. We would be looking at potentially 60% of students participating or more. That's just the numbers that we're going off of. During COVID, we were running about 2,500. So if we exceed that, we'd be somewhere probably between 2,500 and 3,000.
So from 1,800 now to 25 to 2,800.
Yeah.
So
Others.
another 1,000.
Yeah, potentially. We saw, Douglas County, for example, saw a 100% increase in the number of meals they were doing. It's hard to gauge.
Yeah,
So
ask that. How do you forecast that? That's hard, right?
you guess. When we look at the popular meals, we do that basically every day anyways. We know the last time we served this meal, we had 200 kids at Bear Creek eating it, so this time we forecast for that as well.
So help me understand then, the eligibility for free and reduced meals, that doesn't change. That eligibility is all still the same.
Correct,
No
yeah.
change whatsoever.
Yep.
So this Proposition FF, in addition to that, subsidizes the portion that they don't qualify.
Mm-hmm.
But what? I mean, I'm a little lost there on that.
So on the funding or?
Yeah, what does that funding represent? Because see, even at 2,500, let's just say you're at 55% of all the kids, so the others aren't. So the question I'm trying to get to is, what does Proposition FF, what additional funding is it providing outside of the current eligibility requirements for free and reduced lunch?
There's discussion as it moves forward that there would be more funding for staff stipends, but other than that, it's just funding the meals. There's no additional funding that's.
For any student, though?
Yes, yeah.
So that's that's the difference then, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So now instead of, right now, 91.6% of our students don't qualify for free or reduced, so they pay whatever the charge is.
Correct.
With Proposition FF, that payment goes away.
Yes, yeah.
In theory, everyone is eligible.
So it's similar in theory to the preschool for everyone concept, right? So the
Yes.
idea is we want to have preschool for everyone in the state, and the legislature's looking at quality nutrition for everyone in the state.
Correct.
Okay.
At no cost.
Well,
So-
actually at a significant cost.
Well, at no cost to the student who is
Right.
securing that meal. Yes, it does come with an additional
Yes.
cost that is
Community-
funded by,
And the state
Yes.
is paying for it. But
well, taxpayers essentially, but yeah. Yep. Those 300,000 and up, yep.
so where is this in the legislative process?
It's done.
It's done.
Signed.
Okay, so it is law now.
Well, it's law, and what we're now having to figure out is the implications, because what we are now working with is just because it's in law does not mean that we are required to opt in.
Right.
So that's the question essentially for us.
And opting in or out is done on a yearly basis. So to make that clear, we have to make this decision every year. It's not an opt-in and we're done forever or opt-out. So it is assessed on an annual basis.
So if you're going to cover this already, then don't answer now, but just in case. When is the date to opt in? And of equal importance, how much ramp time would your team need to do a quality job if in fact we opted in?
So we have to opt in by August, basically, but obviously we're wanting to make the decision much more
Yeah,
in
let me know if
advance.
you can pull that off.
Yeah, so that's the goal. If we're undecided or we're not prepared, and that's kind of why we're bringing this to light
So
today.
when is the practical deadline for execution for your team in a quality manner?
The practical deadline to make a decision, we would like to make a decision by end of March, early April, to give families a decision, the news of the decision. In the can we come back to what we would need? Because that's going to be covered.
Before we go on, I still have one gap I'm trying to close. So the high schools and the middle school are not part of this
Correct.
acronym. How does that relate to the free and reduced meals?
So-
Are they independent of each other?
Currently, we actually absorb the cost for free and reduced students at the high school level, so, and the middle school. So we, being that we're off program, we can expand our sales. We don't have to follow quite the strict nutrition guidelines. We of course do to the maximum extent possible, but we can sell a lot more food that we can't sell at those elementary schools. Some of it's based on the age group, and some of it's based on whether we're on that program or not.
But if we're not on the program, you're saying that the free and reduced meals for any of those students that qualify, we subsidize
Yes.
direct. It's not coming from.
Yep, we subsidize here in the district.
So you might get to this, and I'll defer if necessary, but why is the high schools and the middle school not in that program? And
That-
have they ever been?
They have been. They were taken off program years before I started, so I don't know quite the history of why that decision was made, other than the financial impact. We can fund our program much more effectively by having the freedom to sell different types of foods.
So the program brings constraints to the menu.
Correct.
Yes, absolutely. And the USDA has just announced that they're going to be furthering to reduce calorie and sodium levels in school meals, which is going to constrain it even more. So I think that the decision, and I hate to guess, but I have enough background knowledge on it, was the financial implication to be able to maintain our department, to be a self-funded department, to sell the foods that the kids are going to want to buy, to have that flexibility, and also to keep more kids on campus too. It helps if they're keeping them here, they're safe, they're getting back to class on time. So, but when that decision was made, I'm not sure.
Can I I know you're trying to get through, but
No, it's okay.
can I piggyback off of Chris's question? So if our high schools are not on the NSLP plan, how are we ensuring that those students don't go hungry that would normally qualify, that are impacted families?
So again, we absorb the cost. So I do accept, we get free and reduced applications for any student in the district, no matter what grade level. We approve them. We absorb that cost. The free students are free at the high school level. The reduced students pay 40 cents for lunch. They get free breakfast right now. And again, that's absorbed by us. And we can do that because we are off program and have the financial leeway from the sales we make to absorb that cost. So they do get a free meal. The reduced students are only charged 40 cents.
So what are the pros and cons to being our high schools participating in the free and reduced program for the high school level? Is there, I know you don't know when the decision came or why. I'm just curious if there's a background. Is it different for how it's
It's a
regulated?
financial motivation. Those programs, because of the revenue that's generated from food sales that are more broad sweeping, because we can sell a lot of different food when we're not attached to the NSLP at the secondary level. So in essence, that's why, is that we have the ability to still subsidize free and reduced lunch eligible students and make a lot of money while we're doing it.
So just make sure I understand, if we did not subsidize it ourselves in-house,
We wouldn't be making the revenue to be able to afford.
because we wouldn't have the resources to have food choice?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
The menu, the
Right.
broadness of the menu would be limited if we were on that program
Yes.
at the high school level.
Exactly.
And
Okay.
just to be clear, it appears that when we have a rare self-funding environment, it provides us tremendous agility
Yes.
to navigate versus being wholly dependent on a federal or state entity which we have zero control over.
Right.
So it's a very good thing as it's built today.
Correct.
I'll just add, there are several restrictions if we were to participate as well that impact fundraising and concessions and many other things.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Just echoes. Yep.
So,
It's confining.
Yes.
does all of that have something, I'm going to make a comment, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like we're able to sell things that probably are not nutritious.
We follow the healthy beverage guidelines for sure. So at a high school level, some of that's defined by the ounces. So if it's less than 20 ounces or 12 ounces, we serve zero sugar and low calorie beverages. We can do caffeinated at the high school level. So we have some iced teas, we have some soda. But yeah, we can do soda. We don't have to follow the smart snack regulations and guidelines. So we can sell things like regular Doritos.
And then, as Amber's saying, if we're at a sporting event and we've got concessions, it limits them more as well.
It can. It impacts a lot of the fundraising. It impacts, you know, there's all kinds of issues that come into play with like competitive foods and stuff too. And so it impacts a lot of what we can do outside of just the school meals.
Thanks.
You're welcome. So currently, in talking about where we stand as a department and the challenges that we're facing, so the anticipation of more students and more menu challenges, we are still currently understaffed. We're understaffed by about 20%. One of my high schools is now 75% understaffed. I have one person, I need at least 4. So just some staffing needs that we would absolutely need in order to run this is we need another supervisor to help with the operations of the department. We are structurally unpoised for this at this point. I've compared nutrition departments to other districts in the state that have our same enrollment. I looked at the pupil counts on CDE and went to those districts, did some research on their nutrition departments, and there is not another department out there that has only one director and no one else in a supervisory or managerial position. So this is not a kitchen manager. This is someone to help with the management of the operation.
What are your span of control numbers?
When I am fully staffed, I am the sole supervisor for 35 to 40.
So it's 1 to 40 current.
Yeah,
Mr. Schwartz, I didn't hear your question.
Span of control question.
What?
span of control.
Oh, thanks.
Far exceeding the 1 to 7 that is easiest to manage. We know automatically that we would require at least 10 more kitchen staff. And that is also, and that does actually include, we added in there, we need a district dietitian. I'm not a registered dietitian. USDA and CDE does not require the director to be a dietitian. And currently we manage those special diets in-house because I work with medical providers. But with more meals and access to free meals, we anticipate a lot more special diets, and we need to accommodate that. So we would need a dietitian. We also need a second delivery driver. I have 2 trucks that go out every day to all 7 schools, and we have 1 driver right now. We have been operating this year with a borrowed utility bus driver that Julie and her department have graciously loaned us. He's done a fantastic job, but I need someone on staff to help because we would also know that we're going to have much more food coming in and going out, and I can't do it with 1 warehouse person. And we're estimating that we will need additional equipment. So you know our schools, take Lewis Palmer Elementary, for example. Those ovens and warmers can hold only so much food. So we're estimating we may need additional ovens or warmers to hold that food in order to get it ready for the students as they're coming through. Otherwise, we won't have enough space to cook the food. So we know that we will probably need some additional equipment. Schools like Bear Creek, that's a full kitchen. They've got plenty of space, but our small schools, LPE, Kilmer, and Palmer Lake especially. Prairie Winds is a little different because they have a different type of an oven, but we threw that in there because we know we will need it. So kind of as I discussed with this is our current eligibility summary. Of course, these numbers kind of change anytime I process new applications. As of yesterday, again, right now, our free percentage in the district is 6%, our reduced is 2%, and paying is 92%.
Quick question on this. Thinking about participation rates of the students. So again, we're only talking about K through 6 in Monument Academy schools.
Yep.
I just want to make sure I'm framing that correctly.
And Stacy, we may have missed this a couple slides back. I don't mean to overtake this, but that bullet that's on this slide 8, I think it's important to reference, and this has come up as a concern from principals as well, that we rely on families actually submitting an application to have an accurate count. We're already challenged to have families submit those applications. We're also concerned that a program such as this could lead to a false sense of, well, it's already covered, which makes our work that much more challenging to make sure that we are actually getting those applications, which speak to more than just food subsidization or meal subsidization. It also includes everything from supplies to fees, et cetera. So it's really important that we make that point, because even though our numbers are small, and definitely much smaller than other comparative districts, every application we get matters. And this is something that, again, we continue to find ourselves challenged by.
Dr. Summers?
Yep.
That very point has been brought up and discussed in multiple districts across the state, on how do we accommodate that challenge. Free and reduced lunch was always, a touch point, and now if that's not a touch point, how do we ensure that those students are still being taken care of? And I don't know if there's an expectation that I haven't heard if we as a district are going to be responsible for coming up with how we ensure that we're still taking care of those students, or if it's going to be a new process through the state.
No, we're accountable. We're responsible. And to your point, I'll just give you an example that Ms. Griebenow from Palmer Lake brought up at our last meeting, which is she made 3 or 4 phone calls just last week individually to families in order to make sure that they were aware of the potential for eligibility and encouraging them to fill out that application. So that's how we're doing it, is just one example.
Okay. Yeah, and I work with the principals very frequently if I see a student who's having accruing negative balances, that I reach out to them, because oftentimes when I reach out to the families, it's kind of like a bill collector. The principals have more of that relationship with them. And so we can usually, between the two of us, have some pretty good luck in getting those applications submitted. And to clarify too, we absolutely need them to fill this out. Otherwise, we would not get the funding that we need, because we wouldn't have those accurate numbers. The beginning of the year, there's a 30-day grace period every year, operational days. So we see a big bump in applications in August, and then it kind of trickles, and then a huge bump in September when those charges start accruing, but it doesn't last long. Most families, once they start getting the negative balance calls, they remember to fill out the application.
So I foresee this also as a need for more resources to ensure that we are being proactive in making sure that we're reaching those families and not just letting those families fall through the cracks for other services that they would normally qualify for under the old free and reduced lunch program.
And one, I think benefit, well, I won't say benefit, the incentive is the transportation fees. That's usually, that is a stark reminder that they have to fill them out.
Good point.
All right, I go back to my earlier question. Thank you. So that-
Can you use the mic, please?
Yeah. So back to the one with the 3 bullets and the numbers there.
Oh, yes.
Thank you so much. Number 10. Vicki, thank you for making sure everybody's got numbers on these slides. I know it's you.
This time they did their own.
So, and to clarify,
We can learn and adapt.
these are the numbers for the 7 schools. These
Right,
don't
so-
include the high school or middle school because since we absorbed that, we don't have the numbers for that.
So here's my question. Of the 92% of paying total, how many are participating? How many are purchasing food versus bringing their own?
If we're doing roughly 18, I mean, we could kind of break it down. If we're doing 1,800 to 2,000 a day, take off the 8% of that.
So 8% of 60, are we doing just LP or are we doing MA also?
We're
All.
doing all.
Okay, so it's 6,500, and then you pull out the 3 secondary schools, right, which are about 2,500 plus 1,000, so 3,500, so roughly 3,000. So 92% of 3,000 is 2,700-ish.
But it's about 1,800 meals a day, right,
It's-
Stacy? So is it about
right.
30%
Right now, yeah, it's
of the 92?
You gotta pull out.
About a third?
So here's
20 to 30?
here's my point. Are they buying full meals? Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
By far, I can give you like, so,
Let me continue the thought here.
Ron, I can't hear you.
Let me continue the thought here, if you don't mind. I'm trying to get to a point, and the point is how big is the animal we're trying to slay, right?
Yeah.
And what is what is our nutrition posture as a district, and what are our customers telling us, meaning the parents?
Well, pre Proposition FF, it's about 25% of our population is getting meals. We don't know, what I'm hearing is we don't know how to predict it in the future because Proposition FF says free lunch for basically everyone.
Everyone, K through 6.
yeah, so this might help answer your question and what I can look at just from last month and pulling up what we served in January, specifically for, we'll go Bear Creek.
May I back up to my question, though? Number one, is our nutrition posture equal to or better than the national standard?
No.
Yes or no? Okay, is it below?
If you're talking posture as infrastructure,
Nope, I'm talking, are the children getting the
Available.
national standard of nutrition?
Oh, yes.
yes.
Absolutely.
Whether they're getting it at
The
home or through the school district. The posture of the student body in District 38, is it at national standard for nutrition?
I don't know if I can answer for home, but I can certainly answer for the meals we serve in the school.
Okay, so maybe half of the kids, while they're in school, are meeting nutrition requirements.
It's
Where I'm
Based
talking-
on
US
having school meals when they're with us? Is that what you're saying?
I'm just trying to understand if we have a nutrition challenge in the school district. In other words, we could also get rid of all of our food if everybody's bringing their own food and they're well-fed and they're healthy and they're nutritious. So what I'm trying to understand is if there's a physical need, if our kids are better off if we provide more meals to them during the day, or if it's a wash. That's where I'm trying to go. Is there value to the program in its entirety on a macro basis, or do we happen to have the fortune to live in a zip code, in a school district where the kids come to school safe, warm, and fed, their nutrition level is at national standard or higher, and it's going to stay that way, and we should spend our time and energy and resources on places where we're substandard or have a chance to excel. That's where I'm going. Does that make sense?
So,
Yeah.
Ron, 8% qualify for free or reduced. That's, so if you're gonna narrow it down to that population, then the question is do we provide that to them? And if so, does it make sense to sell meals to everybody else to make it somewhat self-funding? It's catch-22 where you're going. So
But before we go, I'm trying to understand the animal.
it's about 8% that qualify.
No. Do we have a nutrition challenge?
Generally, no. That's my best answer, Ron. I think most of our kids come to school without nutritional challenges
Right.
that you were just.
And it sounds like about 40% essentially bring their own food.
So last month at Bear Creek, we served a total of 704 free, 259 reduced, and 2,875 paying. Does that answer where you were wondering what the
Well,
percentage is?
No, because then I have to know how many applicable meals per month we're talking about based on the population, the days in school, right?
I think the better way to approach that is we know there's about 25 to 30% of our families beyond who is qualified for free and reduced lunch who do rely on the school to have meals available for their kids, whether that's just a convenience issue or whatever the rationale might be.
So now we're at 40%.
Yes.
Right.
So this is a valuable program in as far as we're able to make sure that we're meeting those needs of about 40% of our student body.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so that gets us to now we have a baseline from which to work, right?
And yes.
You know the four kids out of 10 in both Monument Academy schools and our K through 6 programs rely on us for daytime nutrition.
Correct.
Okay.
But the question for us is really this. Based on Proposition FF, do we put ourselves in a position, can we, is maybe the better way to put it, can we implement Proposition FF as it's currently intended? And the answer is we're not feeling very confident in our ability to do so right now, mainly because of our infrastructure not being up to par with what we know it will have to be. Because to the point that Stacy, I mean, she's very good at what she does, and her team is also very good, but they are stretched as thin can be. And if
We
this
noticed that based on the presentation.
correct, and this can be, the rubber band could stretch so far that it snaps. We may set ourselves up to make it very difficult for us to be, it's difficult already for us to run as we're running.
But now that we have a baseline that says roughly 4 kids out of 10 count on this, okay, which is significant, then we know the baseline says we need to maintain at least. So the question is, independent of stretching the rubber band too thin, if we opt in, is it a good thing for the kids?
Part of this too, we do not deny meals. I want to make that known. We don't serve alternative meals. We serve kids the same meal, whether they have money in their account or not. So there is that too. We do carry a negative balance and the outstanding charges. We are much lower than a lot of other districts. When I started here in 2019, that October, I want to say the negative was about 8,000. We got an anonymous donation again this December to cover the negative balances, minus the Monument Academy. I'll make that clear because in their contract it states Monument Academy will cover those. It was 2,400, but we do not deny meals ever.
So is it a net benefit for the 6 kids out of 10 that aren't participating now to have this, or not? Is it a wash?
Well, before we answer that question, which is good, you said earlier that you've got some data that suggests in some districts this proposition doubles the head count.
We know for sure Douglas County, before COVID, they were serving roughly 3,000 meals. With free meals, they went to 3 million. They went to 6 million.
So the potential is instead of 4 in 10, it could be 8 in 10.
Yeah.
Because that's part of the uncertainty we're dealing with.
Correct.
Yeah,
That's the biggest challenge, is we are not clear on to the degree parents will understand that this is not just available, but it's fully funded. If we have double the families that all of a sudden say, now I want my kid to have a school lunch.
But it's only the food that's funded. It's not the increase in headcount and capital expense, right?
It will be. It will be based on an increase in headcount and the overall capital expense. Because we will now be in a position where we have to fund more meals, more kids. It's all funded by the state. It's not going to necessarily the subsidy that comes from the state will help cover all of that.
Right. We have to front it, likely. But my point is, with the exception of providing a swing loan until funds are reimbursed, if she goes and hires 3 more people and issues a PO for $85,000 worth of gear, are you telling me that the state and or the federal government will reimburse us in roughly 30 days? Or is the district and the community paying for it? That's my question.
Well, do you have a P&L on this fund? Because the question that Ron's asking is too narrow. You really have to look at the entire fund and determine what that means, and then do the uncertain estimate of what will it mean in the future. So what's the average cost of a meal?
I would just say that on the cost that we would get reimbursed, it's not just the ingredients. It is the full support, the full provision of the program. So it does include staffing. Overhead, exactly.
So what do we charge per meal?
Right now, it's $4 at the NSLP
So
school.
just for conversation, we're getting $4 times 1,500, I'll say. That's $6,000 per day or per meal. And that could double.
It could, and we would get,
Just for conversation, it could double. So now it's 12,000, right? And the cost isn't necessarily $4 per meal all in. In other words, the cost of food's, I don't know what the percent is. I suspect we could track it if we had it. But the point being is, if we're selling it for $4 and it costs $3, then there's $1 per meal that goes into this overhead that is in the fund accounting. And so the way you pose the question, it's hard to answer. But the reality is that within that fund balance, it has been self-sustaining except for COVID when we had to reimburse it because they couldn't sell food.
Right. So I guess where I'm going with this is if it's self-sustaining and it's a net zero cost ultimately to the district's operating fund, then is it a benefit to that 60% of the kids that aren't participating to be able to participate? Will they be better off if we offer this or not?
We don't know, Ron. It's a choice, right? It's the choice that the families are going to have to make. And that's one of the things that I think we're open to hearing from our parents, because we've not yet really asked. I don't know that there's a great way to pull all 60% of who you're talking about other than to just say, here's what we're grappling with. But even if the answer were yes to that, this reality is where we're most concerned. Our ability to deliver, yes, is significantly constrained. The perfect world is, we know we have 25 people that are out there right now that are lining up to become a nutrition service worker in District 38. We don't know. of people that are really willing to do that. I mean, as Stacy put it.
I've hired one person that's started since May.
So that's our bigger challenge, is our ability to implement this, even if we're desiring to, or it has the benefit that we think it might carry with it, is significantly constrained. We can essentially keep as is for as long as we can keep Stacy helping us and the team that's already intact to the degree
But that's assuming there's no growth.
Correct.
That's not practical, I don't think.
We
I don't
agree
think
with
that's
that.
an assumption we can make.
Yep.
So what you're presenting is these challenges and cost estimated based on a doubling of the volume, or is there?
Yeah, and I think to boil it down, the intention of Proposition FF is to benefit those 6 kids that aren't, whether it's through more parent time to not have to make lunches or the financial constraints that they may be feeling. The intention is there, but yeah, we talk a lot about the growth in the district, and our 2 of our big schools, Monument Academy Elementary and Bear Creek, are at a point where to stay comfortable, we could use even a third at those schools. We are maxed out beyond our
But-
capability to
but
grow much more.
Coming back to this no longer proposition, it's now the law. The only way we opt out is to subsidize 8% of all our meals, because we have to stay out of that program in order to opt out.
No, if we made the decision to opt out, everything stays the same.
They would still be subsidized by the
Okay,
federal.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So it doesn't change it, is the simple answer.
But
to
if we
opting
opt
for now.
out, if we as a district opts out, then the parents who otherwise would receive free lunches for their kids won't.
That's correct. That's
If they were
So
if
the
they were not
existing-
eligible, the
Correct.
free and reduced kids would still get those.
Only those, though. That's
Correct.
8%
Yeah.
versus
Correct.
40%. So what, if we opt out, I'll make the statement, you tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Yep.
So if we opt out, those who are now paying for their lunches, who could have gotten free lunches if we had opted in, won't get the free lunch.
Correct.
And the extra 100% by estimate of additional students who might participate otherwise won't have that option either.
Correct.
So what we're saying is if we opt out, we don't have to staff up, we don't have to do whatever, but we're going to have some parents who all of a sudden may come to this realization, I could have free lunch if you guys would just opt in.
Correct.
Yeah. We still have to staff up, though, to meet even where we're at now, being out of FF.
Yep.
Just as is.
But you summarized it well. That's essentially the loss would be, I don't have the potential to have those free meals as this law is now providing for it.
So, when I'm summarizing and I'm looking at the pros and cons, I see a con of we're going to have, it's an increased cost for equipment to be able to meet the demands. It's an increased cost to try and find staff when we're already understaffed to meet the demand. We will have to limit the availability of choices that students have, and the quality of the choices will go down. The pros are
In
that-
addition to the logistics of the day. That was the one thing that
Oh, okay. Logistics of the day.
right. The lunch periods, the ripple effects to how we do lunch, what happens to our academic schedule with that, et cetera.
And then the pros to opting into this is based on how this law came about from Colorado voters voted it in. So a lot of our district taxpayers will be funding this or subsidizing this program. So it would be an opportunity for our students, local students, to benefit from the tax dollars that our community is paying into it. Otherwise, that money would go to other school districts. These are just pros and cons. Other districts that do opt in could be seen as more attractive, and we could lose students that way. These are just my thoughts on the pros and cons. And the other pro could be that parents don't have to deal with it or worry about it. They just send their kids to school. It's one less thing.
So Tiffany, just a point of clarification. So if I understood you right, you're talking about the pros, right?
Yeah, I'm looking at the pros and the cons, yeah.
Okay, so is it a pro that other districts opt in and so then they grow and we don't? Is that what you said? Or-
No, I didn't say that was a pro. Sorry, that was a thought.
Oh,
Sorry, my fault.
I think it's a con, but it's a great point. Right? It's a really good point.
It's just the thought. Yeah, I actually have that on both pros and cons
In a
on there.
competitive environment, it's a good point.
Yeah, what I said it was a pro, I'm saying if we did do it, we would maintain that competitiveness. But these are all unknowns. That's just an opinion and guesswork. I think the community engagement piece on those next steps, I think is important because I think that ultimately, I'm curious to know what our principals are saying, what our teachers are saying. I hear what you and your staff are saying. What are our parents and our taxpayers thinking and saying about this?
but in terms of just getting on with our agenda, and we do have to move on, is it fair to say that much like the next agenda item, where we're talking about the calendar and staff compensation, et cetera, there's more work to be done?
Yes.
And you've outlined what those next steps are, and you've even suggested, I believe, that in April or May, you're going to want a decision.
Yeah, I think it's good for our families to know where we're at, and I think it's they need time to plan as much as my department needs time to plan for whatever the decision. If we opt out, if we opt in, we know the benefits, we know the challenges. If we opt in, to reiterate, I've hired one person since May. I'm not getting applications. We are very much challenged there. If we opt in, I don't know what numbers I will have for staff coming back in August, so that's a potential. Not to take away from the positive that Proposition FF is. If we opt in, we have some work to do to get this department ready, and we're working on that now. We've got job descriptions we're working on getting posted for supervisor, for dietitian. That's just the start. We need
But
boots
Stacy,
on the ground.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
No, it's okay.
so you have that one problem of hiring no matter what, right? I mean, that's a reality that we
Yeah.
face, whether it's teachers, your staff, other staff.
Yeah.
That's a reality.
Across industries.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one's unfortunate, and the district has to do something about that. And
Yeah.
we're trying to address it, not just for teachers, but for everyone, right? So we understand that.
Yeah.
What I want to make sure of is, based on the conversations and the comments that you've heard today, do you feel like you've communicated with us what Proposition FF is about and what the implications are?
I feel that way, and I know we've had some pretty in-depth meetings between Dr. Summers and Mr. Coulter and myself. There's more to discuss and details to work out. Tomorrow we have a wellness meeting, and so we'll discuss that. We've got parents on that committee, so it'll be good to get their engagement and feedback in that as well. And then we'll be regrouping and can bring any updates we have. So, but if you don't have any questions, then I feel like I adequately.
I don't have any, and I appreciate the comments I've heard from other board members because it helps us understand. But I'd like to add this, and it's not specifically about your presentation, but your presentation is a really good example of us looking at the comprehensive nature of our business plan, because there isn't one area that's more important than another when you're talking about a system. Yeah. And so I appreciate more than you can imagine how much I appreciate your presentation and how it's those parts and pieces of comprehensive look that is necessary. Ron.
A couple thoughts on this. In the spirit of assisting you and your team to be successful, I'd like to propose that we as a board pick a date and make a decision. And I propose that we try to do that by March 31, so that if it's a opt-in decision, that there is some ramp and some runway, and that the funding is available, and we have to check with Brett and team to ensure that should we choose to go forward, that we're giving you all the tools to be successful instead of asking you to create something from nothing. So that's thing one. Can we as a team agree that by March 31 we make a decision?
I can't go there, and the reason I can't is because I want to see a comprehensive view of our budgeting process. This is one, but so are buses, so are some deferred maintenance, so are teachers' salaries. There's a whole paradigm of issues here. And I would like to look at it as a comprehensive look, so that whatever we decide, we understand what the trade-offs are. Because if we do things in isolation, I want to approve more than we can approve, is what that would mean. So that's my feedback to you. You're asking a specific date, time to approve this.
I think the other thing, and this, I'm trying to be really careful by not creating a dynamic here. We did not enter into this assuming or presuming this was a board decision. Now, if the board is saying you want to make that decision, okay. We will give you whatever information is helpful to you. I don't know I mean, that's probably something for us to look at a little bit more, is who does this belong to? The way we were approaching this is that it really belongs to a district administration. Now, we can give you all the information that you can guide us to say, here's what we think you should do one way or another.
And I'm agreeing with you. And I read the policy that says what the board's responsibility is to approve the overall comprehensive budget. And I want to stay that course.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Okay, I was under the impression you were asking us.
No, this was information, and this is making sure that you are aware, because this is a critical issue in our community. The additional considerations where we had that last bullet was just to clarify that decision-making entity.
So my last and second comment on this is when it involves this many potentially this many of our families, to Ms. Upchurch's point, some citizen and customer feedback is pretty valuable, right? And so I'd be curious to know, and it's going to be hard to get anywhere close to exact, but what a reasonable number is that families that decide to feed their own children during the day at school are spending on a weekly, monthly, school year basis, because for them it's really double hit.
But we do have a precedent now of doing surveys, and actually another survey with a different subject, I don't think such a bad idea. And it might improve your participation rates.
Yeah. We intend to hear from our community on this.
Thanks. It's a tough one. Look, it's not straightforward, but it's important. You're talking
Absolutely.
about 36% of the K through 6 population. 1 out of 3.
Yeah, thank you very much. We need to move on to our next agenda item, which is
Stacy, thank you. This was really informative.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me and taking the time to listen.
Have a great day,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Baker.
So the next item will be our staff collaboration committee feedback. From the agenda, I don't know who's leading this conversation.
So actually, I'll kick us off, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mark, since he helped curate all of the information. So what we're going to spend some time on is the feedback that we received from our January 25th Staff Collaboration Committee. That's part one. Part two is we took that information that was collected in terms of strengths, suggestions / opportunities, as well as questions that SCC brought forth, and we instituted another staff generated survey to get additional clarity on how we might prioritize the suggestions and opportunities. And then that will take us to our third part. So we'll all chime in here as we need to. Mark can kind of kick us off, summarize part 1, part 2, and then we have some next steps that we've developed. So with that, Mark, I'll hand it off to you.
Yeah, thank you for that, and thanks for being here this morning. So, as Dr. Summers said, going to share some process and procedure around the generating of staff priorities driven through SCC feedback. Our intent this morning is just to share with you what our staff is currently prioritizing, share our perceptions, and gather your perceptions. As always, like to start with a look at our strategic plan so that we can center ourselves in our priorities and values. Currently, as everything that we do focuses on all of our strategic priorities, however, we do know that this centers quite a lot on valuing our people. So just wanting to bring that up as a focus as we jump into this. So last meeting together, we dove into our 4 C's categories approach. And just as a reminder for us all, the 4 C's are compensation, which encompasses pay, benefits, leave, professional development, and more. Calendar, which is essentially time spent working and time off. Capacity, which is the program design of the district and efficiencies that can be achieved. Culture, which is our organizational values, beliefs, expectations, and the practices that influence our actions. And essentially, we put those in no particular order, by the way. We used that as a base for an exercise with our SCC, which I observed, and I thought it was fantastic. So on January 25th, we did sit down to discuss some regular news, get some updates, but the meat of the conversation was around an exercise at small tables where groups set to work on the 4 C's, almost in a SWOT approach, where they discussed strengths, suggestions, and questions. And I'm sure it's understood that most of the time was spent on suggestions. So that's where we centered most of our time in response. We received dozens and dozens of suggestions, which we distilled into some overarching themes, bucketing them ultimately into 25 total suggestions. And then we set to ask our staff to help prioritize those total 25 total suggestions. As always, staff voice is key in informing and influencing our priorities, especially under the 4 C's approach. I do want to share out some of the strengths with you all. I think it's important to know what we're doing well, especially before we dive into some of the opportunities. So again, the C's aren't in any particular order, but we're going to start with capacity. Our teams feel empowered to get good work done, even if pay can hamper hiring. Our teams appreciate flexible staffing. They appreciate innovative courses and curriculum, much like our career and technical education program. They appreciate that we receive many grants to help create opportunities, such as the Career and Counseling Core Grant. Within Calendar, our teams like the full-day PLC discussion that's being explored. They would appreciate that moving forward. They do appreciate winter break time off to impact our custodians, among other year-round staff. They appreciate the break schedules we currently have, including having a day, this was mentioned multiple times, in January before students return, gives them some time to center and ground themselves before welcoming students back. And they also appreciate the visual design of our calendar. They say it helps them group and organize.
Mark,
Yes.
you or someone define what flexible staffing means.
Yeah, so we want to understand that a little bit better as well. I think more in the high school realm, and Brett and I were discussing this yesterday, anticipating a potential question on this. So Dr. Summers or Ms. Westheim, please feel free to jump in. But we understand this to be more in the high school range where we would not have necessarily more teachers than needed. So that can be flexible when new classes are brought on or when class numbers exceed or dip to a certain level. But feel free to expand on that.
I'm being honest, I don't know how to, because I don't
Yeah.
know enough of what they actually meant when they said that. So,
Yeah.
not to,
I could make a guess.
I don't want to guess.
That's okay.
Sorry, you can guess if you want to. Do you have a thought, Brett?
No.
Okay.
I said to Mark, I think we need to ask KC what flexible staffing means.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the transparency with which we're operating with.
Yeah.
I guess my work here is done then.
Meeting adjourned. No, that did come up by multiple groups, so I would have been remiss to omit it. And we still desire to understand that point better.
So maybe when you go through the next meeting, we can
Yeah.
wrap our heads around, because that's pretty important stuff.
Absolutely.
Keep going, sorry for the interruption.
Absolutely.
You're good.
In the realm of compensation, I think we understand all of these. They say the pay schedule helps keep potential increases visible and transparent. They appreciate the employee-only insurance option that comes at no cost. They say the pay design rewards experience. They do appreciate it, and this was said multiple times, that it's not pay for performance and is equitable across departments. In the realm of professional development, they said that they appreciated that specifically increases their compensation. Culture, they said building culture is strong, so specifically in the school buildings. And the staff feel like they know one another. It was also mentioned that they feel like they know administration, so that's nice. They say that they feel there are high expectations for all staff, which is good. They say the community makeup can be a strength, and families stay in touch once they depart the district. And then they say there is a culture of collaboration and a desire to hear staff voice, which we appreciate. So, again, we want to focus on some of the suggestions because we feel like that's a place where we can place some priority and work moving forward. We took the 25 suggestions and asked our staff to rank them. So we won't dive too much into the survey or anything like that. We feel like it's best to share the weighted results with you, the top 10. And those weighted results are in order. Number 1, create a program for loyalty or longevity bonuses. Number 2, restore past frozen steps, much as we did in 21-22 with the frozen COVID step. Number 3, increase paid time off and make leave more flexible in practice. Number 4, compensate for time worked off contract. Number 5, honor more years of service for current staff and for staff that we are recruiting. Number 6, consolidate non-student days where possible and add calendar flexibility with the goal of creating more long weekends or breaks for staff. Number 7, extend pay schedules for increased earning potential. Number 8, collapse PLC days into fewer days. Number 9, cut costs, find efficiencies, and ultimately increase salaries. Number 10, revamp professional development to be more flexible and to honor past professional development that staff have taken upon themselves. It might be a little hard to see on the screen here, but we did create a key just so you can see what of the 4 C's these suggestions fell into. As a small note, on number 4, you'll see it's shaded because we feel like it is mostly a compensation suggestion, but we also understand that it has calendar implications. So, mostly compensation. There are some calendar and capacity.
So again, Mark, let's restate this. These are of the suggestions that came from the SCC. We put these into the survey to staff.
Yep.
We had, let's talk about the participation of that survey and the staff.
Yeah. So participation of the survey, we have, let's say, roughly 800 staff members. We had about 500 or so engage with the survey, and we took in results in the ranking exercise from about 350 staff members. That means they took the time to move things around, understand everything, and hit submit. So we have partial results for a large majority, and we have full results from about half of our staff members. So really, really good participation, and it also shakes out to be pretty similar to the actual staffing of our building. So a majority or a chunk of staff were elementary, we had some secondary, and we had some non-site-based staff take this survey. Any other questions in that realm?
Well, just the other thing I would observe is that you'd think with items number 1 and 2, the highest ranking items, you might suspect that this was a bias presented by folks that represent that group, that are the long-serving staff, and it actually is the opposite. The greater percentage of the participation in the survey was less.
0 to 5.
Less, yeah, shorter time staff, and so they are advocating for others than themselves. So I thought that was a really great takeaway from this, that they were advocating for themselves. So this isn't just a what about, here's what I want for me, it's here's what we think is appropriate for the big picture.
And 2 observations on that note, very much so in the spirit of the SCC, so kudos to you on instilling that culture already. And that second thought has already departed, so we'll keep moving forward. Any other thoughts on the survey respondents, Brett? Or any other questions on that?
I have a question. In our previous presentation, there was some discussion about exploring the possibility of staff meals. Did I hear that right? I thought I heard it. Maybe I didn't.
I think I've heard that yes, but not very frequently.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought I heard her bring it up as something that's still being discussed. But is that something that would impact teachers? Because it is value, right? Sure.
That's an interesting
And time, perhaps, both.
Yeah, and what I would tell you, just anecdotally, so it wasn't necessarily something that formally came through the feedback from the SCC, nor was it in the survey. However, I would tell you that at each of our sites and even kind of the culture across the district in various departments is meals are very much appreciated when they are available or catered. Sometimes that is at the support of PTOs. There's buildings that have everything from salad bars that they'll bring in on a particular day to, I mean, of course, there's always staff potluck types of opportunities. Anyway, I think that would fit generally, Chris, in more of a culture bucket. So we didn't necessarily hear any feedback that would suggest it would rise to a compensation type of a perspective, but I think you bring up an interesting point in the overall employee experience that we don't want to lose sight of for sure.
Just a thought.
Yep.
Sure. So we did bucket this into some top themes, and we kept it to the top 10 results. So the top theme was honor experience and professional learning for staff, ultimately increasing their compensation. Second was identify opportunities within the calendar for staff time. This allows staff to be more flexible with their time off work. And then third, find innovative ways to increase pay. This includes potentially reducing some areas or improved efficiencies. Again, keeping that key there. I did want to add a footnote, and it dovetails really well with what you just said, Mr. Taylor. The highest culture item was number 11 in the ranking, and it was solving for sub shortages. And they specifically suggested this to benefit staff flexibility and improved morale. So currently what we hear is they don't feel like they can take a personal day, take a mental health day, because it will negatively impact their classes.
And colleagues, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So question on the top one there.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure I'm going to articulate this well, so apologies up front if I do not. Was there an impression from the team that honoring experience and enhancing or continuing professional learning made them better at their craft and more effective in terms of lasting student outcomes?
In many comments that I read when folks reference their learning opportunities and PD, they say honing their craft.
Okay.
I think that might answer your question.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll add that we've heard a lot from our experienced staff that while they are more than willing to mentor the less experienced staff that we are hiring, that also takes a toll on them being able to focus on their students and continue to hone their own expertise. So while they're very much committed to helping support the newer staff, they also are concerned about the amount of newer staff as our veteran staff leave or retire and those kinds of things.
So I'm assuming there's no incremental compensation for mentorship.
There is compensation.
There is compensation for mentorship. Okay.
Minimal, but there is.
But yeah, point is there's a little skin in the game.
There is.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So for this next part, we want to turn it over to you for your observations and considerations. The prompts for this are, do the themes adequately summarize staff suggestions to your knowledge? And then what are your observations of the top 10 suggestions?
Before we answer, can you tell me what ELT observations means?
Executive leadership team.
Oh, thank you.
So the folks around this table.
So we're happy to blend these two if you'd like, but
Yeah.
we're very
That's fine.
curious to
No,
hear yours.
I just wanted to understand what that was. Do you want me to go first or Tiffany?
Oh, you go first.
Well,
Go back to the
it's a lot of work.
top 10.
I can see that. The fact that there was 500 plus answering the survey, that's a big plus in my mind. I have received a lot of feedback from the last board meeting. Some that 100% agree, and others who want to quit because of the things I said. So, you know, obviously, if we think outside the box, it's dangerous. And I hate that, frankly. I hate the fact that if we think outside the box, somehow that's taken as if we don't appreciate something. That's very constraining. And I don't know why that exists, but that's my reaction to it. Like this concept of having meals every day, and that would give staff more time together and less time prepping their own meals and all sorts of little things. It's not the answer for everything, but it could be a big deal. It could. It makes us more competitive, right? I mean, isn't that what this is all about? And are we thinking outside the box? Did the teachers, and that's the question I'm really asking now, in your review of the survey and the feedback, are you getting outside the box thinking? Or is this sort of just run-of-the-mill standard ideas? Does that make sense, that question?
I think it's an excellent question, actually.
While you're thinking about it, Tiffany, you want to go ahead?
So our observations, the first question, do the themes adequately summarize staff suggestions? That's honestly a question I don't think I can answer. I think that's a question that the team can answer. I would have liked to have been at this meeting, but we had a lot of things going on. We were at Palmer Ridge for, speaking of staff, while this meeting was going on, we had all of Palmer Ridge's staff on hand for open house. And what I don't know if this has anything to do with this, but what I noted was a sense of welcoming teachers that were there for the kids. And at the same time, it was hard for me as a board member to be talking to them knowing that what can we do to help you? And so this is helpful to me as a board member to see what the themes were. And some of these themes are things that I think I'm excited about, like, yeah, let's do this. And then some of these things I look at and think, how do we do this? So I guess that's my thoughts is these are great suggestions, and now what? And the ones that we can do, my thought is, yeah, let's get it done, honestly. And why aren't we doing it? But the other ones I look at, and I think where are we going to get those resources? It comes back into that overarching, what are our priorities and what is our comprehensive plan? I thought it was interesting to see the footnote, for example. That's very important to me. I want to see us do that. How can we do that? And where's the what resource are we going to take away from to make that happen? Does that make sense? I see this as a balance. And as we've been going through this, I've been trying to do my research. For example, what Mr. Taylor was talking about earlier with our last board meeting, and so I started looking into what do we do that is more attractive to our families and our staff that other districts don't do, or things that make us stand out. That culture piece, what makes us stand out. I also noticed on these themes, I appreciate you bringing up the terms, the times that teachers have been teaching and how they've advocated, because what I thought of was, and when I see some of our staff that have been here longer, there does seem to be, part of it still boils down to a lot of the same themes, but culture seems to be what I noticed on there, whereas the new ones, compensation is important. When you're having to be a teacher that is having to live in a trailer on Mount Herman so that you can rent your house out during the summer to be able to make ends meet, that's important stuff. And I know that's not in this theme, but that's just the feedback I've heard. So what I'm seeing on the themes is calendar and compensation. I'm thrilled that they are happy in their buildings, and I want to know what can we do more as parents and as community to continue to have that strong culture. I guess I'll wait I have some other thoughts, but I guess I'll just wait until the end. And I don't know if I shared, digesting.
This is wonderful work. It's important work because at the end of the day, what was the acronym again for the leadership team?
ELT.
So the ELT doesn't have the capacity or the skills to execute the mission of the school district. The staff does. So they need to have skin in the game. So this is great ways to do it. As far as the themes, as long as the themes are the things that they have enough passion about, that they're willing to act on, they're the right themes. Because this is about them, not us. Right? Our job is to inculcate the mission into their passions. So that's thing one. Thing two is this ultimately wraps around compensation and culture. And Chris and Tiffany are right. We have paradigms, not just in education, but in the United States and most Western countries. Cash is king. And we want choices on how we spend our cash. And whether we have a 4-day work week or a 6-day work week, I thought I'd get some eyebrows up. Glad everybody's paying attention.
That's already happened.
7.
Yeah, but yours is 7, so enjoy. It doesn't matter, right? Ultimately, if eggs have gone from $1.80 a dozen to $4.80 a dozen, and gas went from $2.50 a gallon to $3.50 to $4.50 a gallon, it doesn't matter how many days a week you work, you're still buying gas and eggs. So I think we need to think about this in terms of the art of the and, not the or. That's enough. Thank you.
All right, can I add? Number 9 is stuck out to me.
Yep. And we're in that process as we speak. But I can front load it and tell you, I mean, there's only so much before we're, how far do you go?
Yeah, you can't go $4 million on a recurring basis.
Not
unless you want to
even
have
close.
real bloodlet.
Why, and thank you for saying that, because what stuck out to me is that exists, that thought exists, and how do we collaborate and communicate that piece?
Sure.
A great point. And I think, when we embarked upon this comprehensive, long-range strategic plan, we were going to aim for what does the community want an ideal school public education system to look like in Lewis Palmer School District. So that includes everything I've been seeing now for 2+ years, right? And I'm starting to see all the parts. So as we pull that into a comprehensive picture, we need to start getting buy-in from the community.
Yep.
Is this what we want our school system to look like? Because in my mind, I pretty much know where the shortfall is in cash, and I know why. The shortfall only exists because neighboring school districts passed MLOs. It wouldn't exist otherwise. So that's just a reality we live in. Well, that message, we didn't get it out clear enough to enough people. We're 2%, 4%, whatever. We were short. So in my mind, how do we get this comprehensive? How do we have input from the community to define what the ideal school system looks like in Lewis Palmer School District? That to me is important, but it can't be just single issue presentation. It's got to be a comprehensive view of it. So if we need to have 2.5 buses per year, or whatever these different numbers are, you bring it all together and say, well, yeah, we could, this is just for discussion. So we could have free meals for our staff so they have more time, that they don't have to prepare those meals. Whatever, we could do all these things. Well, the impact of what I just said financially isn't the 4 million either, right? There is minimal impacts we can make. But when 80% of your budget's going out in salary, it's not like you have a lot left, and you got to pay the power bill, which is going up, if I'm probably not mistaken, and a lot of other inflationary costs. And that's the other point that Ron brought up, is inflation is real. We see it every day we go out. If I go to the store, it doesn't matter where I go, I see it. Well, so do our teachers. And they're like the seniors who are retired on fixed income. In many cases, below. It's unbelievable. But the point being, and Tiffany, you made me think of this, is how do we present this ideal, maybe ideal is the wrong word, but a sustainable public education system in Lewis Palmer School District? Because that picture has to go to the community. Because it's not the teachers that are going to vote. Yeah, they'll vote, but my point being is we need, what was it, 9,000 on both sides, or 9,500? How much was it? We need 10,000 votes, right? Roughly, in order to pass an MLO, which is really, unless we go to a sales tax or some other form of revenue, it's the only one that's more common, if you will. So how do we get 10,000 people to understand what the sustainable public education system needs to look like? And when I say sustainable, again, I'll say it, we're only wanting to be average on salary.
And that's purely for staff compensation, right?
Yeah, because all these other things, I think we can fit in the budget. Yes, and it needs to be carefully monitored and set apart and tracked.
Well, I think having that conversation with the community, we want to make sure that the conversation with the staff really sets that up for that, and we're not getting one in front, the community conversation in front of the staff conversation, just because part of the way we pose this to them, everyone works at any company sees things that says, why are we doing that? Or should we really be doing that? And so that is the prompt, and that is for them to have that conversation on point number 9, and to help us find those things which I think can help us get to their vision of what the sustainable is, and can that vision of that sustainable match with what the community wants. So I think that's kind of the process, or the sequence, if you will, of how we can have that.
Right. Whatever sequence, you got to have all the ducks in a row, just like nutritional services is a part of it, right? All of it has to be put in place. And then you have to be able to say, this is what we're proposing, and it's not averages. It's not a round number of 4 million. It's some pretty precise number that we say, this is what we need to be comparable to our peer group, if you will. And maybe that's really not enough. Maybe when we look at it, our deferred maintenance might need some factor. I don't know. But the community wants to, they really do want the big picture. And you're still going to face always the anti-tax people. That they're never going away. So the point being is we have to sell our story, and we have to sell it before we start the campaign. Because your hands get tied when we start the campaign. So we need to be selling the story today. And selling the story, the easiest way to sell a story is to get participation in the development of that story. That's where the Engage and Elevate process needs to start earlier than later. And do we have all the pieces now? You laid out the sequencing. Well, okay. When are we going to the community with Engage and Elevate? And not about a single issue, but about that comprehensive public education system that we want it to be sustainable. I mean, my goodness, why would any of you stay here if our community doesn't want to sustain it? Right? I mean, that's a fair question everybody has to ask themselves. That's what teachers are asking themselves. Why do I want to stay here when I can go somewhere and be better off?
The other thought I've had in your question about innovative suggestions, I'm really seeing that these 10 that we distill into those 3 themes, these are kind of the what's, as you were saying, Tiffany, and the how is more on the innovative. How do we get these done is where the more innovative opportunity is currently. Because this is kind of these first steps, these first current observations, these first things that would really resonate with staff. And if we can start to make some progress on those things, then I think the potential for innovative, not just hows, but innovative what's will expand and open up for us.
May I piggyback on that? Everybody knows this, but we don't pay attention to it enough. They don't watch what we say. They watch what we do. Right? So if we can find something we can take action on, super valuable. Right? Super, super valuable. May not have to be huge, but it's a beginning.
If I can add to that, one of the ways we started this meeting was demonstrating to the SCC that the feedback that they provided in the December meeting was the basis by which we structured the bonus that was approved and then administered early January. So, in fact, there was a note on a couple of tables that spoke to, we appreciate that you're hearing our input and you're acting on it, and we want to see more of that. So that's just one small example. Actually, it was $1 million example, but it just speaks to what you just spoke to. Yep.
We'll also be bringing you a proposed calendar shortly that will include feedback from the SCC and the greater staff on collapsing the late start PLC days into whole day training days for staff.
And this is being innovative, out of the box thinking, and so, don't slap me around too much. But, there's some interesting television shows on today. So I can watch people fix up homes, or do I sell it, or do I remodel it, right? Or cooking, right? I watch these Halloween cooking competition, right? There's all sorts of reality TV. So why don't we create a reality TV around barobotics, as an example, or our construction class, or our nutritional services? Why don't we have some cooking contests, right? And have students and or parents, moms and daughters, or dads and daughters, all sorts of things that you could do to commercialize and raise money. Well, that's not what public education does, is it?
Not typically.
Not typically. But how far outside the box do we have to think to try and fix the issue.
There's no rule against making a new box either, is there?
Yeah, I think within, what was it, number 9 on the suggestions, what staff are proposing also includes looking at innovative programs and which of those programs brings in potential revenue to the district and which ones don't, and what's the customer demand for certain programs versus others.
Thank you for all that conversation. We'll get to some of our observations as well. And I'm just going to zip right through these because I think we're coming up on the end of this. Our observations from what we heard from staff and what we observed in the survey is that the culture in D38, especially in our buildings, is strong, but it can continue to be strengthened. Our staff seek ways to be valued and ways to further increase their compensation. They want to be paid appropriately. That's what a lot of this conversation just centered upon. They are interested in streamlining program processes and anything they can do to help that goal.
Can I ask that you change that word appropriately to fairly? Because I don't think it's, even if it's fair, I'm not convinced in my own mind it's appropriate. I mean, we're talking about the next generation, and so
Sorry.
I don't want to go down that conversation, but it's not appropriate even if it was fair.
The reason I'm laughing is because Mark had fairly in there, and I said, hey, can we change that to appropriately?
Yeah.
Mr. Taylor, we're on the same wavelength.
Sorry.
Mark 1, Brett 0.
Guess so.
Actually, I think it's more like Brett 50, Mark 1 or 2. And then the final point is when compensation changes are constrained, as they have been, our staff are interested in increased opportunities for calendar and leave flexibility. It helps soften the blow. Brett, do you want to take it over with some next steps?
Hold on before
Some
you
fair
leave
next
this.
steps.
So no feedback at all. No feedback saying, yeah, I'm up for pay for performance, right? Nothing like that came back.
You stepped out during that slide. Can you
Oh.
go back to that slide?
During the strengths portion, it came up for all groups that not having pay for performance was a strength.
Can I share something that I've learned on studying that? The districts that make that model successful already have an elevated base pay. So if you have a strong, higher pay than your neighboring districts, then that performance piece comes in the form of bonuses and incentives, not your paycheck relying on it. But, hey, look, my class did X, Y, and Z, and so, yay, we're going to reward you with a bonus. But they usually have higher, they're already elevated. They're not looking for how do we catch up. That's what I found so far. I'm still looking into it.
We'd love for you to share whatever you find.
Okay.
I mean, that's you know, we continue to say all possibilities are on the table. Now the reality is we have to work within current constraints to be able to make whatever we can happen. And then the other thing, and Mr. Taylor's may go back to your original note about where are we inside or outside the box. I think what might be helpful, may not be the conversation to have right this moment, is getting outside the box of what do we actually mean by pay for performance. Because until we define that, what I can tell you is that the thought is constrained by what's inside that box of what people are typically thinking about. My question might be, well, how are we actually defining what we mean by that? And then can we look at that from a different vantage point? Because I think what the traditional paradigm of that represents is what we're hearing loud and clear from people. Don't do it that way. But
We probably agree.
right. Right. So I think that's just an important note to mention.
So next steps on March 2nd point, what's DLT?
That's district leadership team, which means that it includes the principals. So it's
Got it.
this group plus the principals.
Got it.
And that gets to that point, was it 9?
Yes.
Ms. Upchurch, that you brought up, that staffing level approach, which probably harkens back to that flexible staffing bullet that we're still working to better understand. We're going to find some opportunities within what we are planning for next year that could earmark certain availabilities to free up some funding that we can redeploy into compensation. But as we already mentioned, I mean, we're not talking anywhere close to 4 million in that regard. So just important to make note of that.
The SCC meeting on the 16th, can you remind me again what time that meeting is?
We've been having those meetings starting at 5:30.
Okay. And the location is
Right here.
here.
Brett, can we double check and make sure Kelly, I think Kelly's the coordinator of that invite, that the board is, are you included, did you get the last one?
Yeah, I saw,
Okay.
I just couldn't, I was asking.
Yeah, no, it's
Reminder.
yeah. we'll
Okay,
talk to her
just
about
wanted to double check, thank
that.
you.
Yeah. So these next steps, these really intertwine really well with the budget process for the course of the spring too, and that's why you see that May as that kind of final point of presenting these coordinated assumptions results that would reflect in a 23-24 proposed budget. So these are kind of the milestones and what we want to significantly make sure as happens around those milestone dates and to kind of bring this together.
And I just want to throw one more thing out there, and at the risk of opening up a whole nother presentation, which we're not prepared to go into detail, the community engagement piece through whether it's more of an engage and elevate feel or some alternative approaches is something we do want to spend some time on, and I think we can talk through where some of those opportunities live at our next meeting, but really it's the spring. So there has to be some parallel engagement from both staff and community in that coordinated effort.
Before we move on, can I share one more observation or thought? I've also been starting to talk to other school districts in the state of Colorado that have gone to the 4-day schedule. And just Thursday, I just talked to Weld RE1, and it made me think, and I would love to help do this, create a spreadsheet of columns of what are observations or concerns or thoughts. For example, what I've heard is the first year implementation is always difficult. A lot of folks are adjusting, they're frustrated. By year 2, it's smooth, and nobody wants to go back to a 5-day. Test scores, there was no decrease or increase. Weld County does it, for example, on a Monday. And so they found that for the early, especially in elementary, they found that the kids were actually paying more attention in class, and it freed up opportunity for athletes who were more engaged in activities. So although that superintendent likes a 5-day, he said that there was no difference in how it affected performance. So it made me think, when we're talking about calendar, can I help, or can we create like a spreadsheet that says, this school district does it, here's their observation, test scores, up, down, neutral. Childcare, how they, just categories, I think, to collect that information and gather that information.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if that comment lives here in this presentation or not.
It didn't in this particular presentation, but doesn't mean that it's not still the opportunity, and so we'd welcome whatever that is, and we've got some of that ourselves too, so that'd be great.
Excellent. Great work again. And it's informative. So the last item is our financial planning analysis, staffing and enrollment.
Oh, you want to just take that? Our computer's not good enough for you?
Had enough of this.
Always here. I'll come in.
How much time do you guys have?
There's always a
6 minutes.
Okay. Brett, you have 6 minutes.
And
So hit the highlights.
All right, can I just run?
Please.
So in board docs there on item B2, there's a few different files that I provided for you. The one I want to bring to your attention first is it's called Business Office KPIs Market Share. This is a graph that I put together in result of some of the conversation we've had recently about choice enrollment, and just wanted to be able to provide some of the information that we have. And so this schedule, like many, is you can read it from the bottom right to look at some of the numbers first might help. And what you can see in the bottom right here is the 22-23 year, our net choice enrollment activity with 4 of our neighboring competing school districts, and one line that really I provided just because it's so interesting to me. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But in the very bottom right number, you see a plus 43. Plus 43 is the answer of what is our balance of choice out versus choice in. That means we had net 43 improvement, just a few more choicing in than choicing out. And that's the column, then the 2 columns that come to the right says that there were 731 students that choiced into the district, 688 students that choiced out of the district. And go vertically up that column, and you can kind of see where they went. Our biggest choice out, our biggest relationship is with D20, both in choice out and choice in. You see it's 500-ish, 400 to 500-ish students going each way. Our biggest profit center, if you will, is Douglas County, which of course makes sense because the county line is so close here, and especially their high schools are far away for a lot of those residents that are just on the county line. So they are much more interested in choicing over here. Let me say also that of our choice in, if you look at that 731 choice in, 40% of that is Monument Academy. 40% of that is Monument Academy. Another third of that, another full 33% of that is what goes to Palmer Ridge and Lewis Palmer High School. So those are the choice in drawers, if you will, attractors for the district. Yeah.
Of the ones that go to Lewis Palmer and Palm Ridge High School, is there any way to define how many are athletically driven?
I'm sure there is. I don't have that in the data sets that I have, so I'd have to pursue that question, I think, with the building staff, because I can see the names and then be able to say, okay, hey, sure. Yeah. So yeah, and I have no doubt that that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
So the red line that's there is speaking of athletics, I think is probably an interesting one, because to have out-of-state enrollment in the Pikes Peak region, there's really only D20, D11, Douglas County, not necessarily Pikes Peak region, Douglas County, but anyway, and then us that have out-of-state enrollment. So we're kind of an anomaly, which again I think speaks to the athletic part of it, that is a consistent factor that we have as a positive that a lot of other districts don't have. And just quickly again, trying to maintain pacing. Just look at that very bottom line is kind of that net answer. And so in general, there's a couple of down years, especially years ago, but the recent history is generally a moderate pickup of students from the choice enrollment process, which I think is very appropriate for us because we're not overindulging people that want to choice in and creating capacity strains for us. Although there's some particular points in the district where we might want to have some of that conversation, but in general, the big picture is choice enrollment for us is good. It's appropriate. Not fair.
Mark just slouching his chair. So I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Is that based on October count?
This is October count.
Okay, so it's about $350,000 net incremental to the district. Okay.
Right.
So at 75,000-ish a teacher, it's about 5 teachers, 6 teachers.
MA is in there as well.
Yeah. So 2 of those will be MA and 3 of them will be here.
Still teachers.
Yep.
Still roughly the same number. It's a very good thing.
Okay, you want me to move on? I think the other thing in particular I wanted to show you, there's two files there at the beginning that are Lewis Palmer School District 38 trial balance work session and one called dash staffing. I don't usually provide the dash staffing version, but I wanted to bring it and show it to you to follow up on it's part of the conversation we had last time about the student-teacher ratio. And what I provided at a summary view provides something of a different answer than people would expect on what student-teacher ratio is through the district. And so I wanted to show you kind of how it calculates and why I calculated it the way I did. And so what I showed you for Lewis Palmer Elementary was something along the lines of 12. This is updated for the January results of payroll. So in January, I would say we had 12.8 students per teacher in Lewis Palmer Elementary School. And if we go up, if you go vertically up this column, you'll see that I have one number in blue and then a bunch of red numbers. And so that blue number is I think the kind of the core traditional that you have in mind. These are the basic classroom teachers, and in that number, the ratio is 17. There are other teachers that are, again, part of our programs that provide services or programs or whatever, but when we add those in, they kind of end up diluting that student-teacher ratio from that kind of high point expectation of 17 in this case down to the 12, which becomes the final measuring point. So when you talk about adding in the GT teacher and the EL teachers, counselors and deans and things like that, these are things that, again, from the CDE perspective, the staffing report that Misty is working on right now, those are all considered teachers. But so when it comes to the student-teacher ratio, from an official basis, they're included, but from a practical basis, I wanted to show you kind of what the starting point of that is. And so I've done that for each of the schools here on these slides. Questions? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Question or comment. So that's an average, right? Because I think if you were to walk into some of our classrooms where some of our teachers are looking at
Right, yeah.
25 plus students, they're going, that's not my ratio.
Right. It's an average for this, yeah.
But a kindergarten class may be a smaller ratio.
So think about your specials teachers.
Right.
So you've got your art, your music, your physical education. There's a tech teacher right now in elementaries. So we are not distinguishing between classroom and those are still classrooms. I should say those are still classroom regular teachers. And then to Brett's point, there's additional licensed educators who may not run the traditional classroom environment. So I think, yes, you're right. Now, I guess that's the question: is that something that is still helpful for us? Sure. I mean, I will tell you, we work hard to keep our ranges right within the established board policy ranges. And sometimes there's give or take one or two in there. But as a general rule of thumb, that's what we go back to is what's built into policy.
Sure. I just wanted to make sure I pointed it out that this includes other classrooms besides
Yes.
your typical third grade or sixth grade or
Absolutely.
second grade classroom.
Absolutely.
And the other point I would make on these sheets in particular, this is the information that I'm starting with in the conversations with principals to say, okay, let's talk about staffing for next year. So in that bullet point on the prior presentation, when we say staffing recommendations, it's going to be informed by this and even the next layer back, which is basically all the individual names that are behind all these numbers. And just for them to consider as we get into another season of attrition, what do we pursue in terms of replacement, and what do we pursue as a different path that may adjust how we do it in terms of trying to find efficiencies wherever they might exist. Is that a good way to say that?
I think so. Yeah, and actually, that might represent a little bit of what we were talking about with flexible staffing, is that there are some opportunities within the principal's reach, which is informed by collaboration with their staff to say, hey, how are we currently staffed, and where do we have opportunity to be flexible as according to building needs, et cetera. We're kind of an in-between model. What I would say is we're centrally allocated through through the lens by which each principal approaches their ability to staff their building appropriately. So there are some flexibilities that are afforded to buildings in that process. It's not an entirely site-based allocation model because that would essentially establish a pool of dollars and the principal can staff their building however they see fit. So we're in sort of that in-between state.
So it's 10:04, or you can cry uncle.
Well, you answered what I had asked for at our last board meeting, and I appreciate it very much.
Great.
And I'm going to use this data to come up with a one-pager,
Okay.
maybe two, that will go along with the attendance, because again, those are our real drivers, right? Staff and attendance, so. I promised you that, but you gave me the information I can use better now.
Great.
Cool. We look forward to that.
Thank you, Brett. Any other comments or questions for Brett? Hearing none, let's preview the board agenda for the 21st. I have already, and I don't have any comments or questions. I get it.
Just a quick clarification question, Mr. Ridgway. Do we anticipate having a preliminary annual comprehensive financial report, or?
So auditors were on site last week, and again yesterday, as they were leaving me yesterday, they thought they could have it. They would have a draft to us later next week, which would mean yes, it would be draft, but potential. So still TBD, I guess.
And if that were the case, the intent would be to include the preliminary draft with an opportunity for preliminary review. The actual approval or final approval of the audit would occur then in March.
Yes. Correct.
Very good. Any comments or questions, or any other items come up that you want to add to the upcoming board meeting?
I do have a very small note, and this is just more FYI for you. However, I neglected to mention in our January meeting that we have been hard at work in the approach to identifying or hiring the new principal for Bear Creek Elementary School. We have engaged in several steps in our process. It has been a fantastic engagement with that community. We've had excellent applicants, and we intend to have a finalist or selection that we're able to formally announce at our Tuesday, February 21st meeting. So I just wanted to make sure you all were aware of that. Because our timeline was pretty aggressive in that we knew that Ms. Parsley was going to be retiring at the end of this year, in which case we wanted to get a jump start in that process. So I'd love to be able to invite that individual forward, just so that they can be introduced. That would occur within the superintendent update at that meeting.
21st?
Correct.
Awesome. Well, it's awesome, but it's also sad. I mean, yeah, Peggy's.
It has been. Big shoes to fill, but what I can tell you is that the community has been great to work with. And as I mentioned, we've had some excellent candidates, applicants, and a very rigorous and fair process. And so that yield will be, I think, an excellent leader that we're onboarding with a lot of time, I might add, to really help build that transition plan with Peggy and her team and our support between date of hire and onboarding officially in July. So I just want to make sure you guys had that heads up.
It's good to know. Tiffany, any reflections for today?
Not that that needs to be added to the February 21st calendar, but I want to make sure that we are continuing to elevate the work that you as a team are doing and the motivation we have as board members to continue to address our priorities with our staff through those 4 C's. So I want to make sure that, I mean, obviously it's not agenda item, but I just want to make sure that we are keeping that conversation going. And there's things that we've talked about, so there's going to be questions and buzz, like the calendar, 4-day, or what are we doing? So I just want to make sure that we're continuing to find a way to show that that's still being elevated and still being pushed and talked about. So that would be my reflection on the agenda. I also wanted to share that, so I went to the Capitol on Thursday, and I will be going back again this Thursday, and advocating for D38, and there's already 50 bills out of 232 bills that are education bills. And I'm sharing this because I think it's appropriate to share it in a work session, but the dynamics of the legislature are very different than we've seen in the past, on both sides of the aisle. So I really appreciate the advocacy work that Colorado Association of School Boards does and that Ms. Atwood's doing, because that's a tough job being up there and advocating. I talked to some lawmakers, I talked to our own lawmakers, but I talked to other lawmakers in other districts, and to put it in quotes, quite frankly, when I talked about teacher compensation, which is a problem throughout the state, the response is, it's not their job to figure out how to pay our staff. It's our community's job to figure out how to pay our staff, and it is our job as board members to show it to our community. And these are Republican lawmakers, I want to point that out too. So when we say go to the state, which we're doing, but I want to make sure that we're being realistic in that how that conversation transpires. That's my
I'm so glad you opened all that up. My goodness, there's so much I want to say. Here's what I'd like to just can I just really quick mention that in our conversations with both Ms. Atwood as well as our monthly conversations with members of our Lewis Palmer Education Association and others that are interested, we've identified March 1st, which is a Wednesday, as an opportunity to spend a day at the Capitol with a representative group of staff. We'd love to involve some parents, Ms. Upchurch, if you're available, or if there's other board members that are also available, we'd love to have you with us as well. So I want to get more details to make sure we're honing in on that March 1st date.
Okay.
But it echoes exactly what you said. My understanding is Representative Wilson would be our primary host for the day, but I think we would envision other representatives or our state senator to be also part of that conversation. And I think you hit on an excellent point, which is one that we see essential to helping community understanding as well. So thank you for bringing those comments up, and I'll follow up with you offline on that March 1st opportunity.
Yeah, I'd like to go.
Wonderful.
Any more reflections?
Thank you for the work
Awesome.
you guys did. These were great presentations.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Ron?
Yeah, so to piggyback on what Tiffany said, I think everybody did a nice, crisp job this morning. Thank you all. One item I might ask we consider for the agenda in a couple of weeks is a simple 2-minute, 1-page status report on where we are with our Schneider contract. There's so much good news here. And if we have the same format once a quarter, and we say, look, this is what we invested, this is what we said was going to happen, this is what's happened, this is the net dollars we've put back into the coffers, this is how we've spent it. Any questions?
For the February meeting, Mr. Schwartz, thank you for bringing that up. We would love to present that within the superintendent update, and then that should allow for additional opportunity for some follow-up in future meetings as well.
Yeah, I just think that if we continue on a periodic basis, it's important that the public know the return on investment that they're receiving
Yeah.
in such a wonderful engagement that the team has chosen to enter into.
Thank you for that, and we will make sure that that is part of our Feb 21 meeting.
Uncle.
In the superintendent update, right?
Yes. In fact, and I would echo that same sentiment within Ms. Upchurch's comment, that we will be sure to, that might be a more robust update than, not that they aren't robust already, but we can set the stage for that, as well as how that tees up the calendar presentation draft within that item as well. So great recommendations.
And there's another item that I just don't want to let it slip through the cracks, and that's our single employee evaluation process. We haven't begun that. Is it possible that you could start your self-evaluation process towards March timeframe, March work session, and then the board would have time to do their review, and then perhaps an executive session for that purpose in March? Is
That works great for me if that works well for the board. Absolutely.
Just, I don't want to lose track of it and get behind.
Just remember, Misty's you're a resource for you on that as well for both sides.
Welcome.
If you haven't already, review what we did last year, because last year's process worked, I thought, quite well.
Yeah, we'll mirror that. So I'll, to your point there, Mr. Taylor, I'll take the first step in that self-reflection report, and then we can get those details to you all for the board's input. And I love the March timeline. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Awesome. And just to echo what the other board member said, thanks to everybody, whether you're here right now or not, and those that are here, thank you for your work. And I see so much focus now. I think all we're waiting now is that comprehensive view, because everything, I don't know what we've missed over the last few years. We've got all the pieces. Now let's put it into a view.
Mosaic.
And Brett, you're almost there.
Mosaic.
You really are. So very good. Thank you all. We'll adjourn till the 21st at 6 p.m.
Thank you all.